Before his death, Paul Newman revealed 7 actors he hated the most. Paul Newman was the kind of man Hollywood wanted you to believe was flawless. The blue eyes, the quiet charisma, the philanthropist who gave away hundreds of millions to charity. For more than 50 years, he was seen as the ultimate gentleman of cinema. But what if that image was incomplete? In the final years of his life, as Newman looked back on his legendary career, he did something no one expected. He made a list. Not of his greatest films, not of his proudest achievements, but of the 7 actors he couldn't stand. And the truth behind why these Hollywood giants tested his patience reveals more about Paul Newman than any award ever could. Stay with us, because this story isn't just about who he hated. It's about the principles he refused to compromise. Tom Cruise. When energy becomes a collision, Paul Newman had spent decades mastering silence. Not the silence of absence, but the silence of confidence. By the time The Color of Money went into production in 1986, Newman was no longer chasing relevance. He was relevance. A man who understood that the camera doesn't need to be impressed, only respected. Then came Tom Cruise. Electric. Relentless. A human engine running at full speed from the moment he stepped onto set. At first, Newman admired it. He always respected preparation, discipline, hunger. Cruise had all 3 in abundance. He arrived early. He trained obsessively. He wanted to earn his place beside a legend. But admiration has a limit. On set, Cruise orbited Newman like a planet caught in gravity. Constantly talking, constantly explaining, constantly performing even when the cameras weren't rolling. Every movement felt charged. Every moment was loud with ambition. Paul Newman didn't work that way. For Newman, acting was subtraction, not addition. Say less. Move less. Let the audience lean in. Cruise, meanwhile, leaned forward, always. The tension wasn't explosive. It was exhausting. During press tours, it got worse. Cruise spoke endlessly about how much he had learned from Newman, how inspired he was, how intense his training had been. To the public, it sounded respectful. To Newman, it felt like noise drowning out the work itself. Paul believed that if something mattered, you didn't need to advertise it. Backstage, he joked about it, dry, surgical humor masking genuine irritation. But those who knew him well could see the shift. The patience thinning. The fuse shortening. This wasn't about ego. It was about philosophy. Cruise represented a new Hollywood, one driven by visibility, branding, momentum. Newman came from a world where craft spoke quietly and reputation followed naturally. 2 generations. 2 speeds. 1 collision. Newman never lashed out. He never embarrassed Cruise publicly. In fact, when asked directly, he chose his words carefully, as he always did. "He's very dedicated," Newman said once. Sometimes, abundance can become too abundant. That was as close to criticism as he ever came. But privately, the line had been crossed. Cruise didn't disrespect Newman. He overwhelmed him. And that mattered. Because Paul Newman believed that acting wasn't about burning as brightly as possible. It was about burning long. About sustainability. About restraint. About knowing when to step back and let the story breathe. Tom Cruise never learned how to stand still. And for Paul Newman, that made all the difference. This wasn't hatred born of conflict. It was irritation born of incompatibility. A reminder that even talent, when unchecked, can become friction. And that sometimes, the hardest thing for a legend to tolerate is a mirror of the future rushing toward him at full speed. Charlton Heston. When values become a breaking point. Paul Newman believed that fame was never neutral. To him, visibility carried weight, moral weight. If millions listened when you spoke, then what you chose to say mattered just as much as how well you acted. Maybe more. Charlton Heston didn't see it that way. Heston was a monument. A voice like thunder. A presence carved from stone. On screen, he was Moses parting the sea, a charioteer defying empires, the embodiment of moral authority. America trusted him instinctively because he looked like righteousness. That was the problem. Paul Newman watched Heston rise beyond cinema and step fully into politics, using that commanding voice to defend causes Newman found deeply troubling. While Newman marched against the Vietnam War, while he spoke out for civil rights and progressive reform, Heston moved in the opposite direction, embracing hardline conservatism, eventually becoming the face of the National Rifle Association. To Newman, it felt like betrayal. Not personal, philosophical. They never worked together. There was no shouting match on set, no explosive argument over scripts or screen time. This conflict lived in something far deeper: conscience. Newman couldn't reconcile the man who played prophets and heroes with the man who stood behind podiums defending violence, glorifying war, and simplifying moral complexity into slogans. He didn't hate Heston's politics because they were different. He hated them because they were powerful. And power, Newman believed, came with responsibility. In the 1960s, the divide became impossible to ignore. During one campaign season, Newman and Heston found themselves in the same restaurant, both supporting opposing candidates, both fully aware of the other's presence. Newman didn't acknowledge him. Not out of arrogance. Out of refusal. To Paul Newman, silence was sometimes the only honest response left. Friends later recalled how deeply this bothered him, not in a fiery way, but in a slow, simmering disappointment. He felt Heston confused the authority of the roles he played with the authority to define moral truth in real life. At one point, Newman summed it up with a line so precise it cut clean through Hollywood myth. Some people confuse playing great men with being great men. He never named Heston. He didn't need to. What made this conflict especially painful was that Newman wanted more from him. He wanted Heston to rise above ideology, to recognize the influence he held, to choose nuance over absolutism. But Heston didn't waver. And Newman couldn't forgive that. This wasn't about left versus right. It was about responsibility versus certainty. Newman believed doubt was healthy, that questioning power was a moral duty. Heston believed conviction was strength. They stood on opposite sides of the same spotlight, each convinced the other was misusing it. Years later, Newman softened, slightly. He acknowledged Heston's cultural impact, his place in American cinema. But the unease never left. Because for Paul Newman, the most dangerous thing a public figure could become wasn't wrong. It was unquestioning. Charlton Heston didn't make Newman's list because of ego, talent, or temperament. He made it because Newman believed he chose certainty over conscience. And for a man who lived by reflection, restraint, and moral accountability, that was unforgivable. Frank Sinatra, when genius stops showing up. Paul Newman believed that the work deserved respect, even when no one was watching. Frank Sinatra believed the work should be effortless. On paper, their collaboration made sense. Two legends. Two icons. Two men whose presence alone could fill a theater. But when they finally crossed paths on When Time Ran Out in 1980, the illusion shattered almost immediately. Sinatra arrived like royalty. Unbothered, certain the world would wait. And it did. Hours passed. Crew members stood in the sun. Equipment sat idle. Schedules collapsed. When Sinatra finally appeared, script barely touched, he delivered a take or two with casual precision, and then disappeared again. For most people, that was Sinatra being Sinatra. For Paul Newman, it was unacceptable. Newman prepared obsessively. He believed every scene carried the weight of everyone who showed up early, everyone who worked quietly in the background, everyone whose name would never appear above the title. To him, professionalism wasn't about perfection. It was about respect. The tension built slowly, invisibly, until the day Sinatra arrived nearly 3 hours late, halting production entirely. When Newman finally spoke, he didn't raise his voice. He didn't posture. He didn't threaten. He simply said what everyone else was too afraid to say. That holding up a set wasn't charming. That talent didn't excuse indifference. That showing up mattered. Sinatra didn't take it well. For a man accustomed to deference, being corrected, especially by someone who refused to bow, felt like an insult. From that moment on, the air between them turned cold. They worked. They spoke when necessary. Nothing more. Years later, Newman reflected on it with characteristic restraint. Some people think talent excuses behavior, he said. I've never subscribed to that view. It wasn't bitterness. It was principle. Newman didn't deny Sinatra's genius. He admired the voice, the presence, the history. But genius, to him, was not a free pass. It was a responsibility to set the standard higher, not lower. Sinatra represented a fading era where power insulated stars from consequences. Newman represented a quieter ethic, that respect for the craft extended beyond the spotlight. When asked directly about Sinatra in later interviews, Newman offered a single, carefully chosen sentence. "Frank has a lovely singing voice. Nothing more." That was the verdict. Frank Sinatra didn't make Paul Newman's list because he lacked talent. He made it because he stopped honoring the process that made talent matter. And to Paul Newman, that wasn't just disappointing. It was a betrayal of the craft itself. Marlon Brando, when greatness is wasted. Paul Newman never envied Marlon Brando. He admired him. And in some ways, that was worse. Early in his career, Newman lived in Brando's shadow. Critics called him the next Brando, as if he were a sequel instead of a man. The comparison followed him everywhere. Auditions, reviews, whispers behind studio doors. Newman learned to live with it. But what he could never accept was watching greatness decay by choice. Brando was undeniable, a force of nature. When he first appeared on screen, he didn't just change acting, he rewrote its DNA. Dangerous. Alive in a way Hollywood had never seen before. Paul Newman knew exactly what that kind of gift meant, because he treated his own talent like a responsibility. As the years passed, Newman watched Brando drift, showing up unprepared, ignoring scripts, letting cue cards replace rehearsal, treating filmmaking as an inconvenience rather than a collaboration. To Newman, it felt like sacrilege. Robert Redford once described Paul's reaction perfectly. Watching Brando in his later years was like watching someone burn a Picasso to stay warm. That image haunted Newman. Not because Brando failed, but because he didn't try. Newman believed that talent was only the beginning. The real work was what you did with it when no one forced you to care anymore. Especially then. He came from a belief system where you owed your best to everyone on set. The grips, the extras, the editors, the audience who paid to believe in you for 2 hours. Brando owed them everything. And gave them indifference. This wasn't rivalry. This was mourning. Paul Newman wasn't angry at Brando. He was disappointed in him. The way you're disappointed in someone who could have changed the world one more time and chose not to bother. When Newman heard stories of Brando's behavior, of lines taped to furniture, of disengagement, of treating the craft like a joke, it offended him deeply. Not because it broke rules, but because it broke faith. In one of his final interviews, Newman offered a sentence that carried more weight than any accusation. Great talent comes with great responsibility. Not everyone understands that. Everyone knew who he meant. Marlon Brando didn't make Paul Newman's list because he was difficult. He made it because he reminded Newman of something unbearable. That the greatest tragedy in art isn't failure, it's wasted brilliance. Steve McQueen, when collaboration becomes combat. Paul Newman never saw acting as a contest. Steve McQueen saw it as a battlefield. For years, Hollywood treated them like mirrors of the same idea. Two symbols of cool masculinity, two men who could command a screen without saying a word. Audiences compared them endlessly, even though they had never worked together. Until the towering inferno. From the very beginning, tension wasn't just present, it was engineered. Before a single frame was shot, McQueen demanded parity. Same pay. Same number of lines. Same moments of heroism. Even the same number of steps climbed inside a burning building. Nothing was too small to count. To McQueen, balance meant survival. To Newman, it meant obsession. Paul came to the film focused on story, on collaboration, on playing men who set aside ego to save lives in the middle of chaos. McQueen came focused on position. Billing became the symbol of everything that followed. McQueen insisted his name appear no lower than Newman's. The result was infamous. McQueen's name first, Newman's slightly higher, a visual stalemate frozen in the opening credits. It was clever. It was exhausting. On set, the contrast became impossible to ignore. McQueen watched the camera, counted close-ups, measured applause. Every scene felt like a negotiation. Every moment, a calculation. Newman didn't play that game. He believed acting was a shared act of trust. One person lifting the other, not pushing them down. McQueen believed if you didn't fight for every inch, you'd lose relevance. Two philosophies. One set. Director John Gillerman once summed it up bluntly. They were making a movie about heroes who put ego aside. While off camera, Steve was obsessed with winning. Newman never exploded. He never stormed off set. But something hardened in him. Later, he described the difference with surgical precision. Some actors see every film as a competition. I always saw it as a collaboration. Those two approaches don't mix well. That was the line. Not envy. Not hatred. Rejection. Steve McQueen didn't make Paul Newman's list because he lacked talent. He had plenty. He made it because he couldn't stop fighting, even when no one else was trying to win. To Newman, that was the ultimate misunderstanding of the craft. Because the best performances aren't conquered, they're built together. John Wayne. When myth becomes a wall. Paul Newman never argued with John Wayne. He didn't need to. The distance between them was already absolute. John Wayne wasn't just an actor. He was an idea. America in boots and dust, a walking monument to certainty. On screen, he never questioned who he was or what side he stood on. He didn't have to. The world adjusted around him. Paul Newman came from the opposite place. He believed doubt was strength. That self-examination was necessary. That if you stopped questioning yourself, you stopped growing, not just as an actor, but as a citizen. Their conflict was inevitable. During the Vietnam War, the divide hardened into something personal. Wayne stood proudly behind the war, lending his star power to the Green Berets, a film Newman considered propaganda, dangerously simple in a world that was anything but. Newman meanwhile marched, protested, campaigned, spoke openly against the war, even when it threatened his career. To Wayne, that was betrayal. To Newman, silence would have been worse. Friends recall Newman watching Wayne's public statements with a quiet disbelief. Not anger, something colder. He couldn't understand how a man so revered could reduce complex human suffering into slogans of patriotism. And then there was the acting. Wayne played John Wayne. Every time. Newman respected the success but rejected the myth. He believed acting was transformation, that each role demanded something new, something vulnerable. In a rare unguarded moment, Newman said it plainly. I admire his success. But John Wayne plays John Wayne in every movie. I've always tried to play someone different. The comment traveled fast. When Wayne won the Oscar for True Grit, an award that had eluded Newman for years, Paul smiled publicly, congratulated him, did everything right. Privately, the frustration cut deep. Not because Wayne won, but because the industry rewarded certainty over curiosity. Later, after Wayne's death, Newman softened. He acknowledged Wayne's cultural impact, his place in American history. But even then, the unease remained. We disagreed on practically everything, Newman said once. But you can't deny he was an American institution. Sometimes institutions make you uncomfortable. That was the truth. John Wayne didn't make Paul Newman's list because of politics alone, or acting style alone. He made it because he represented a version of power that refused to question itself. And to Paul Newman, a man who believed responsibility began the moment you stopped playing heroes and started shaping reality, that kind of certainty wasn't strength. It was a wall. Robert Redford. When friendship tests patience. Paul Newman saved his greatest frustration for the man he loved most. Robert Redford wasn't a rival. He wasn't an ideological opposite. He wasn't even difficult in the way Hollywood understood the word. He was worse. He was late. From the outside, Newman and Redford looked like destiny. Two men whose chemistry felt effortless, whose films became timeless. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. The Sting. Laughter, charm, lightning trapped on celluloid. Audiences saw harmony. Paul Newman felt tension. Newman lived by the clock. He arrived early, prepared, grounded. He believed punctuality was respect made visible, respect for the crew, the craft, the moment itself. Redford existed in a different dimension. He drifted. He wandered. Time bent around him. On set, Newman would be ready at dawn. Cameras set. Crew waiting. Silence stretching longer with every minute that passed. And still no Redford. Director George Roy Hill remembered it vividly. Paul never complained loudly. He never embarrassed Redford. But the irritation sat in him, sharp and constant, like a pebble in a shoe you couldn't remove. The cruel irony? Redford would finally arrive, hours late, and deliver perfection in a single take. That drove Newman insane. "The worst thing about this kid," Newman once muttered, "is that he can show up 3 hours late and still be better than most actors after a week of rehearsal." It wasn't jealousy. It was injustice. Newman believed discipline was earned. Redford seemed to bypass it entirely and still win. The crew noticed. On the sting, they gave Newman a gift. A clock where every number was replaced with Redford's face. No matter the hour, it was always Redford o'clock. Everyone laughed. Paul did too. But the message landed. What made this conflict unbearable wasn't anger, it was affection. Newman cared about Redford, respected him, trusted him. That made the irritation sharper, not softer. Because you expect more from the people you love. In later years, they joked about it. Redford admitted his flaws. Newman accepted them. Time sanded the edges. At an AFI tribute, Newman summed it up perfectly. "Working with Robert Redford taught me patience. I had none before. I needed all of it with him." That was the truth. Redford didn't make Paul Newman's list because he was careless. He made it because he challenged Newman's deepest belief, that excellence required order. And in doing so, he forced Newman to confront something harder than ego, politics, or wasted talent. That sometimes, brilliance doesn't follow rules. And sometimes, the people who test us most are the ones who give us our greatest work. In the end, Paul Newman's list was never about hate. It was about standards. Every name on that list, every legend, every icon, represented a line that, in Newman's mind, had been crossed. Not lines of talent, not lines of fame, but lines of responsibility. He couldn't stand wasted brilliance. He couldn't tolerate ego disguised as passion. He rejected certainty without reflection. And he had little patience for those who forgot that greatness is not what you achieve, but how you behave once you've achieved it. What's striking isn't that Paul Newman judged others. It's that he judged himself by the same measure. He showed up early. He prepared relentlessly. He respected the people behind the camera as much as the ones in front of it. And when he spoke, whether through his work, his politics, or his silence, he understood that influence is never neutral. Paul Newman didn't believe fame was a reward. He believed it was a responsibility. And maybe that's why this list still matters today. Because in an industry and a world that often celebrates attention over integrity, Newman's quiet intolerance reminds us of something rare and uncomfortable. That principles don't disappear when you succeed. They become more important. So the real question isn't who Paul Newman couldn't stand. The question is, what standards would you refuse to compromise, even if it cost you everything? If this story made you see Paul Newman, or Hollywood, differently, take a moment to like this video and subscribe for more untold stories behind cinema's greatest legends. And tell us in the comments, which name on the list surprised you the most? Or better yet, do you think these private judgments should have remained private? Your voice is part of the conversation. We'll see you in the next story.